Hi, Frank. Nice to meet you.
Hey, how's it going? Everybody can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, so здравствуйте.
Nice.
Let me start with myself, I guess. My name is Kristoffer Neegaard, and I'm the head of the music conference in the North, Inferno Music Conference. It's a conference hosted in conjunction with the Inferno Metal Festival every year. Today, I guess we have a collection of people from different parts of the planet. We're going to discuss the differences in the metal communities and similarities or differences.
Well, guys, I mean, I got to say, I guess the fact that we're talking to me is in a way confirmation of exactly why we started World Metal Congress. So among other things, I've written for Kerrang and I ran Metal Hammer for about 10 years and then moved on to make videos and music documentaries and that sort of stuff. But something that I really wanted to get involved with was a consequence of the work that I was doing when I was at Metal Hammer, because I was really lucky to travel to places like India, to Nepal, and just kind of see how different metal scenes were interacting. And it was really inspiring to me. And as someone who grew up in the south of Italy, even though it's not that far away, I just remembered what it was like to not really feel connected to all the stuff that was going on. And it became important for us to, cover that when we were at Hammer. But when I left, I wanted to continue that work. And that's where World Metal Congress came about. And we had our first event in 2019. And it was great. We had people from all over the world. And it wasn't just about getting the international feel to it all. Really international. I mean, just people from Indonesia, from Singapore, the list goes on, but also addressing important issues as well. It felt great because it made me feel like it was me at the beginning of my journey as a music fan. And that's why we do it. And I guess in that way, that's why we're here, because Kristoffer at Inferno got in touch because it felt like we had a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm Frank Godla from Metalinjection and Blast Beat Network. You've probably seen some of the videos that I've done and things I've done over the years, which has been now 17 years of doing Metalinjection, which has been it's a long time, a long ride, and it's been amazing. And a lot like Alex, it's taken me all over the world, and it's just a beautiful thing. I would never think that I'd be so fortunate to not only work in the music industry and work with so many of my heroes and get to befriend them, but also really get to explore the world in the name of metal and getting to know fun people like yourselves.
My name is Vladimir Kravchenko. I make a podcast in Russia about heavy metal music, rock music, and punk and other stuff.
We do our conference called Colisium. It unites, many promoters from all Russian and different neighbor countries. So it's a pretty huge conference since 2007. I also was involved in many festivals.
I mentioned that in Russia, we got a few really popular new metal bands just translate from English to Russian and sing these songs word by word. And it becomes very popular. Did you notice something like that in other countries?
I mean, to be honest with you, that's the first time I'm actually hearing about that. I wasn't aware that other places in the world do something like that. I mean, I've been to Spain where I see that in movies and television all the time. Like they'll translate literally everything back to Spanish for their viewers. For us in music, I mean, it seems like if it's not in English, it's not going to be popular. I think Rammstein has been the only anomaly to exist in America that, it's not in English and it's still doing really well, So other than that, I literally can't think of many other bands that, I mean, of course, there are other bands who sing in other languages and we can talk about them all we want, but they're not going to be a really big thing, because if you don't speak English, then it's just, not going to gravitate with the American audience.
No, really big shows. I mean, 5,000 people.
Wow. I could just pick something up there. I mean, I'll never forget. I was very lucky to go along with In Flames to Moscow. This is probably like over 10 years ago now. And it wasn't 5,000 people venues, but I remember going to a club and they had covers bands on. And they were literally playing everything from System of a Down to Green Day to like literally there was almost like no specific thing, but it was just rock and metal bands. And it's funny you mentioned that because I've seen it in parts of the world where there isn't a lot of touring, you know? So it's almost like, okay, if bands aren't going to come and play their music for us, we're going to learn how to play it and do it ourselves. And I've seen that in other places also. I mean, in India, it was big. When I went to Kathmandu, like, oh my God, I mean, literally the Rage Against the Machine is like their national band. It's unbelievable. And it's not like just metal in general, like almost anywhere you go in Nepal, there will be a cover band and they will be playing Rage Against the Machine. It's like, it's unbelievable. But again, it's just because it just shows the desire for live music. You know, it's just the internet has changed so much. But I think something very specific to metal is it's not enough to be able to hear it. It's like you need to be able to see it live as well. And so it's an interesting question, I think. Frank, I just want to say, I'm sorry it's taken this long for us to meet, but, you know, big admirer of your work. And man, it's so interesting what you're saying about whether things are in English or not, you know, because it's just like really, it's just trying to bang a drum for stuff sometimes. And it's just, you know, if it's not, it's like people sometimes overlook it. I mean, I think things are changing in a really important way, but man, it can be a bit of a barrier to enter.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's always a constant struggle, you know, to try and get people to pay attention to bands that really deserve it, you know, whether they sing in English or not. It's, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, kind of on topic for what we're talking about, I love and appreciate music, and I think that metal is a sound. It's not a language. You know, maybe it's a language of its own kind. You know what I mean? That it's you know, I can listen to like a band like Fusco, you know, from Spain, who sings in Catalan, and it's like such a beautiful language, and I think they should get all the attention in the world. But you know, it's really hard to convince, you know, a lot of people about that, and it doesn't stop me from trying. So, of
course. Well, I mean, isn't it interesting to see the success of bands like The Who, for instance? You know, who are, I mean, I think it's almost it's the sound, but it's almost like the culture, you know, that people are fascinated by. You know, and probably that's a special case, but I mean, I don't know if that would have happened 10 or 15 years ago, but man, they have captured people's imagination, which is, to me, I just think that's so interesting and kind of inspirational as well.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, you know, even with Russia, for instance, I look at those old videos of Pantera playing to Russia. I mean, we've all seen that, and it's just this beautiful thing. It's like, I mean, most of the crowd might have not even understood what he's talking about, but just like the energy and the music, it didn't matter, you know, and metal really brings everybody together.
Which country do you think nowadays is growing up faster than others in metal music?
From my perspective, I mean, it's like, how do you measure it? You know, I mean, for instance, like Indonesia is a really interesting part of the world. If you look at like Hammer Sonic, 10 years ago, that was a DIY festival. You know, in 2020, they were booking Slipknot, you know, so that's an incredible achievement for what has felt like a really grassroots movement. But, you know, it just shows the power of generations. You know, what happens, like, you know, we've all probably, no offense, guys, but, you know, I don't think there are any young kids in this Zoom chat, right? I think we're all of an age where we might have people in our social group where they have kids, and every metalhead parent that I know wants their kids to be raised to become metalheads, you know, just like that thing. And I think that just has a mathematical consequence, you know, and it changes things. I mean, I didn't have that when I was a kid. My parents were lovely, but, you know, but nowadays you have like whole metal families going to shows, and that really has the power to change things, which I think is quite amusing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see, you know, new metalheads out there, and it's gonna, you know, because at the end of the day, metal is still fairly new. It's only 51 years old, which is, you know, if you look at jazz and rock and roll and classical, there's there's all these other forms of music that are just so much older. So we're still in the growing pains here, and learning like what's going to happen next.
It might take like the riot factor out of the music, maybe, but the kids are not like angry as other previous generations. I don't know. Kind of, it's very safe now compared to what it used to be. I don't think we have like a reason to be really angry in the Western world, I guess. But Russia, I guess you have some more challenges that could be put focus on in music. I know at least in South America, I've been there a lot. That's why I have a reference there. They have so many things to complain about, to be angry about, because they basically have all the challenges we used to have 30 years ago is very much real there still. The metal families, that's of course very nice, but it's takes the edge of the music. I have a little suspicion.
I think that's not only a generational thing, but maybe a geographical thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody from Norway to say that, there's no reason to be angry. I mean, we just, I'm sure everybody is, I don't know that you are aware of what's going on in America, but we just, the presidency. I mean, there was so many angry, I've never seen a country so angry, so I think the last 4 years in America has been pure rage, actually.
My friends from different bands in Moscow, they filmed their new videos on these riots recently. So it's going to be more and more, I guess.
I think it's a personal thing, like what makes you angry? It's really dependent on the individual. There could be a singer out there who's just enraged by, I don't fucking know, coffee cups and wants to sing about it. You know what I mean? Like if you just have that angst, like you want to get it out, metal is a place that you can do it. So I'm never in fear that metal's not going to be angry, and that there won't be any metal, because you can find anything to be angry about.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, it's the eternal question, if we have this many problems, where's all the good music, right? Because we associate, like in America, right, the late 60s with like an incredible explosion of just rock music, like, wow, right? Because, I think it's just things are a little different now because music isn't the only way that people express themselves. I mean, they have like direct means like social media and all these other things. But I think, yeah, it's important to remember that, in many parts of the world, just looking like I do would be a political act, and it's going to get your kind of people very unhappy about that. And so I think it's interesting how Frank, I think you said, yeah, it's a geographical question. You're right. It depends on what part of the world you're in. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I'm wearing an Iron Maiden shirt, of all the, a band that's been around forever. Nowadays, you kind of get usually people in the supermarket going, good band, right? That wasn't necessarily the case. It's impossible for a lot of people to remember that 30 years ago, maybe. That's not what you would get. And in many places, in most parts of the world, in fact, that is the state of things, and much worse as well. I mean, I mentioned Indonesia. I remember the first time I talked to the singer of a band called Burger Kill, who were phenomenal there, right? Literally, he was telling me about, because we were interviewing him about how Jokowi, the president of Indonesia, is a Sepultura fan and, likes Burger Kill as well. And he was telling us about, giving us some insight into how up in the north of the country, they'd had like a punk festival, and the police literally turned up, and they literally they shaved all their heads and then arrested everybody, and it's just like, that's it's like, wow, it puts it in perspective for things. And so it really does depend on what part of the world you're in. And if anything, I guess Frank not wanting to go on in a big American tirade or whatever else, it's a powerful reminder that we should never get too comfortable politically, because things can really kick off, as I guess we just saw there. And I suppose what's happening in Russia is also a powerful reminder, that a lot of people are fighting for things, and music is a way of expressing their anger about stuff too.
Yeah, I think any big countries, such as Russia is huge, and America is a huge country. You're going to be divided, met with a division of people, and it's almost like two different ideologies, two different countries in one. So at no point is it ever going to be really at rest, because there's going to be two opposing views, forever, until something really dramatic changes. And I don't foresee democracy not being the thing in America, for the future. So,
well, I think it's, the difference between the government mostly, but not between society as it is. Society relates to this music and to these thoughts. So I guess it's pretty similar everywhere.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
There's a censor, like of course, in America and Europe and all these countries, basically probably South America too. But we're not subjected to censor like from the governments in the same way. I don't know about Russia. That's kind of interesting to maybe to hear about, because there's many other countries in the East where you basically can go to jail and get a very severe jail sentence, if not worse, charge on blasphemy. So I don't know if this is an issue in Russia and other.
No. We got no such things.
Well, we had this problem like maybe 5-7 years ago, when some Christian activists were against some bands like against shows from bands like Behemoth and Cannibal Corpse, stuff like that. They tried to make some problems for them not to making shows and cancel all this. So it was pretty big problem for 1 year maybe. Then it was just just disappeared somewhere, and then it was okay until this pandemic stuff. So I hope we'll be back soon.
There is no jail sentences for metal music, for nothing like that. If there is a way it's touch the religion, then it can get some actions.
I mean, I would love to hear about the scene of Russia. I mean, I've been to Russia before, and it's a beautiful country. It doesn't strike me as a very metal place at all. But I do know that you guys have metal bands there, because I get emails from a lot of small bands there. What is the scene like, for a young band coming out of Russia?
Well, the scene is pretty huge, I must say, because we have all type of genres, like, from rock, metal, and thrash and death, and even really huge black metal community in Russia, because it was always like that since, Metallica vinyls just arrived in the Soviet Union, since 80s, I guess, in the whole USSR countries like this. But in Russia, I guess we have more and more metal bands nowadays. And even this year, we have this Metal Over Russia festival coming this July. I hope it will happen. They have really cool lineup from worldwide and many Russian bands on the lineup as well. So something happens, something really good happens. So yeah, we have different, communities in different social networks, like local Vkontakte. I can show you some, playlists and stuff like that from really different genres.
Is it mostly like St. Petersburg, or is it kind of sprawled out everywhere?
Different. St. Petersburg, Moscow, Siberia, even in Kazakhstan, we have really cool bands like Zaraza, for example. They are really known worldwide since their last release. Even Metal Hammer was reviewing the CD.
We got Spotify only in the last year. Yeah, now we can check the lists of listening, and some charts appears. And the first one shows that the only one very popular rock band in this top 10 is King and Joker. King and Joker, it's some fairy tales, it's some scary tales, it's fast melodic punk rock.
Maybe in some Misfits kind of way, something like that.
This is the most popular bands. But also I should mention that heavy metal bands, I know you mean, who think about the road and the sword, just classical heavy metal bands. Like you got T-shirt of Iron Maiden, I believe, Alexander.
I do indeed.
Yeah, I believe there is a band which takes a lot from Iron Maiden, and this band is the most popular band right now from heavy metal. But stadium wide, we got the band named Leningrad. Leningrad, it's even should be on Ziget. Oh, it was on Ziget. It should be on Coachella the last year. And this one is some kind of ska punk humor thing. A lot of irony and ska punk. So everybody's celebrating. This is I believe the most popular.
It's like Google Barbarella stuff, yeah.
This is the most popular band nowadays, I believe, in Russia. Just stadium tours every year.
They're from New York. Go Bordello. Surprisingly, it's the singer is from New York. So
yeah, he moved to New York later. Yeah.
Well, they call it Balkan music, right? So it's very easy to think that they're from one of the Balkan countries, I guess.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we have different bands like playing doom metal, death metal, I guess.
And also, when some big show coming from the Europe or from the America, USA, I mean, it gathers a lot of people, 10 to 12,000 people, big stadiums. It's always a show. It's always Rammstein. I believe sell their tickets 3 times more expensive than usual show in Russia. It's just it's stadium, and still we sell very, very expensive tickets. It's always sold out.
Now, I know we're talking about the differences in our scenes, and we have Europe, we have Russia here. I know in America, it's so big that we actually have 3 different markets when it comes to touring. We have an A, B, and C market because America is too big of a country to get every single city in one tour. I don't know if something like that exists in where you guys are.
Yeah, in Russia before pandemic, we have pretty big tours, like 30, 40 cities a year. Maybe the biggest bands can make it. And even bands like Sepultura, they traveled Russia a lot, like playing 20 shows, the whole Siberia and Ural and the central part of Russia.
Frank, you mean that in USA you get 3 different, schedules for groups and do not interrupt each other in cities or what?
Right. Well, it's kind of like that. But say, for instance, Between the Buried and Me, like they're a big band now, and they'll tour the A market. The A market will consist of Los Angeles, Vegas, Seattle, New York, the big markets. And then they'll take maybe a month or 2 off and then go to the B markets, which are the smaller cities, and then, 6 months to 8 months down the line, when the cycle is kind of being completed and it's almost over, they'll go out and do a C market, a couple shows in like Florida or something like that. And the idea is that they break up the touring. So, we don't have bands doing, 200 shows in one tour, so instead it'll break up the market like that because it's just too big of a country.
That's very interesting.
I didn't know if anybody else did that or not. I mean, but that's kind of like the reality of what we work with here in America all the time.
Yeah, I guess the scale is unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, compared with Europe, the UK and all of continental Europe, that's 2 time zones. I mean, what you have in Russia, 11 time zones. I mean, it's
crazy.
It is kind of mind-blowing. And it's interesting, though, because, talking about doing those, circuits, to me, that feels like a very punk rock and DIY, amazing, literally get in the van kind of thing to do, literally just to kind of hit everywhere. Like when you were talking about music from Siberia, it's like, just sign me up. I'm just interested to know what they're writing music about, what it sounds like, and all that kind of stuff, because to me, that just feels so personal and interesting, that there are audiences to support this music that far out. I mean, that's massively exciting.
I think in Siberia we play a lot of black metal kind of music.
Yeah.
I believe the nature by itself provides you to make such an emotion.
It's an incredibly big area. It must be
Some genius writing the best black metal album over there. My answer for my question about the country that leads new stuff, I believe it's German, because it's often for me when I hear some new music in different styles and then check the origin and it said Germany, and I said, oh, it wasn't expected, because sometimes it's very good emo screamo music from Germany, thrash metal bands like Bring Me the Horizon style. How do you name Bring Me the Horizon style, by the way?
Metalcore, I guess.
Yeah, it's a complex question. These days they're sounding a bit more like Linkin Park, but yeah, their sound has evolved. But it's an interesting question about Russia, about Germany, because I think in many ways Germany feels like the most metal country in so many ways, simply because that is a country where it's not like, wow, so if you're talking about like what charts musically or whatever else, I remember this is like 3 years ago or something, because I was at Wacken and they were all kind of celebrating there, Wacken open air, just this incredible thing. And for 3 weeks, there was like Motorhead went to #1, and then Slayer went to #1, and then Amon Amarth went to #1. Literally in 3, like literally the #1 records in the country. And I just can't think of anywhere else that would happen, just where bands have that level of commercial success within the country. It's not like some underground thing or some weird marginalized kind of music where you're kind of a bit of a freak and you're basically regarded in a very tokenistic and dismissive way by mainstream media. Like in Germany, there is no irony. There is no, kind of hesitance. Metal is incredibly mainstream over there. And it's kind of hard to get my head around that because I'm used to it always being somehow on the outside. But it is quite astonishing. It's not to generalize, but it's very different there from anywhere else that I've been.
I think you're absolutely right. Germany is really metal country, but I would also put, I think Norway and Sweden in there as well. I mean, those three come to mind when I think of, ubiquitous metal, culture. And that's a huge difference than what's going on over here as well. I mean, because it still really is the bastard child type of thing. It's like you might see like pop stars or stories about really famous people wearing a metal T-shirt here, but that's as far as mainstream for metal kind of goes. It still really is the thing that people might everybody here has heard Metallica, whether you like metal or not. But they don't go that much further. You know what I mean? Like they're not like taking that and then going to listen to Slayer and then jumping to Cannibal Corpse or Suicide Silence or anything. It's like still very is a niche thing here. Whereas, places like that, it's an amazing thing to see, dudes just walking out in the street like it's no big deal. And I feel whenever I go to countries like that, it's like, it just blows my mind to see, to be in Germany and be like, wow, this is, I feel like I'm in home or in heaven, like a metal heaven here, And
we should mention the summer festivals in Germany, because we all over the country, in every city, in every week, every month. It's just you can choose what do you want to visit, or you can visit one band 10 times if you go with them through all these festivals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Summer Breeze.
Yeah, me too.
I adore it.
I love Summer Breeze.
It's a crazy good festival.
Yeah, absolutely. Weirdly, I was there to film this Amon Amarth documentary. And we filmed it there because they did 2 nights. They did like an old school set and a new school set. And it was just this beautiful Germanic town, just this antique town. And to see it totally taken over by metalheads, and like the locals and the metalheads that had moved in, they were all friendly. It was almost just like this sort of beautiful expression of how people could get along. But the festival itself is just it is just exceptional. It's just absolutely one of my favorites.
I like to see that integration happen and coexist, really comfortably. Tilburg and Roadburn is another example of something like that too, where, the metal takes over the little quaint town and everybody's really excited about it,
Well, that's the thing about the Inferno Festival too, kind of, because we have it's during Easter, and Norwegians, they go to their cabins in the mountains. So basically, we have an empty capital full of metalheads from all over the planet. It contributes to local economy as well. Festivals like this, especially when they're put into small cities. Well, Summer Breeze is a very good example because the whole town is basically must be a real boom in their income during the year.
They sell a lot of beer. Let's put it that way. They sell a lot of beer. But then again, I mean, it's funny because in terms of my career, going to Inferno Festival, I mean, I know it's not exactly summertime, it's spring, but going there has been such an influence on how I rate other festivals, because I've never been to something like that just brought that much together under one roof. Because I mean, just like literally going along and just some of the bands that that festival gets to headline, it's like, wow, it doesn't have to be underground, it can be this big. And it's not just locals buying beer, it's people traveling internationally to be there. Roadburn is another perfect example.
Inferno has from numbers from 2019 was over 60% was foreigners. So there's less Norwegians at the festival actually. So it's more common to hear English being the language at the festival than Norwegian.
You can add about the festivals because Finland was also always the biggest and the nearest country for Russian people to travel to different places and festivals like Tuska for sure every year, and many big shows like the Big Four stuff and anything every year they have many festivals. It was really good opportunity to see many bands at the one place, and also always was a big exchange between some club bands between Finland and Russia, because they traveled a lot to play in Helsinki and some couple of other places in Finland, and they did kind of answer shows for them to play in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and I think it still works like that, like some small DIY club shows.
I was going to say I fully agree. There was a study they did where they said how many metal bands per population, and I think they determined that Finland has the highest number of metal bands per capita, more than any other country. And it is quite incredible. I mean, Helsinki, everywhere you go is just a rock bar or just a band walking by or whatever else. And I used to go to Heldon Festival, which was hosted by Ville from Him every year. And he basically booked his favorite bands into Tavastia. It'd be Cathedral one year or an Anathema the next, whatever else. And again, that international travel thing was unbelievable because the whole world was there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Tavastia is a cool place. I
love it. Many, what do they drink there? Lonkeros? This is like the other thing, not to generalize about metalheads. Someone needs to do a book just about the different metal drinks of the world. Like you've got a big Jägermeister thing behind you. Obviously, that's like the gold standard. In India, it's Old Monk. They love this.
Yeah, I know this. Yeah, my favorite. Yeah,
just destroys you. I guess you guys have got to be drinking vodka. Obviously, it's got to be the.
Well, I'm not a big fan. I like Old Monk more than vodka because I love to travel India a lot. I've been like 7-8 times there, and I met a lot of metalheads there, and still we're in touch with some festivals and with metal community from India. They're really cool guys. I guess we can invite them then the next time.
Good idea.
I prefer Jack Daniels.
That's classic, that's classic.
Yeah, heavy metal classic. Guys, what I want to ask you, because we got this opportunity, is there some, I don't know, fights between genres in your countries? Because we still got this, I don't know, hip hop versus rock stuff.
In Norway, this isn't really isn't the issue, but Norway is a very, very neutral country. So it's like, it's not happening at all here, basically. And I don't think Sweden or Denmark has any issues either with this. So I don't know about the rest of the planet, but Scandinavia is very neutral when it comes to this.
No, I don't mean we fight on the streets. I mean we just
no, but just like some kind of
versus thing.
Yeah. Like attention. I would say for the US, it's a little tricky. I mean, you're gonna hear about it. There's definitely some markets or some cities that don't coexist really well. But the truth of the matter is that hip hop and metal. Well, hip hop is obviously a little bigger, more commercial than metal is. But really, the biggest of them all is country here. Country is the biggest export of American music. And so no matter what we're fighting about, hip hop versus metal, like country is still taking, all the money away. So
cool.
It's the same in Russia, I guess. Not classic hip hop stuff, but we have Russian hip hop on Russian language. So it's pretty huge.
I've actually heard some Russian hip hop. It's really interesting, But I think at least I can only speak for my experience. I have a lot of metal friends that are into old school hip hop, and myself included. I listen to occasionally old Wu-Tang Clan records or Jay-Z or something like that. I don't keep up with it, and I don't really know what's going on today, especially with pop and country and everything. Like my whole world is metal at this point in my life, and has been for most of my life. But occasionally I'll, the classics, they never die, right?
By the way, the country is the good thing, because if you come from the country, you already can play, you can sing, you can drum, everything. You're a musician.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's funny. I remember, I can't remember what year it was, 1977 or 78. Frank, maybe you can help me out. I remember, didn't they book out a baseball stadium and have a sort of rock versus disco rally? And they just basically, they literally just destroyed all these disco records because disco was the great Satan, of everything. And it's interesting, it's hard to say, because I kind of feel like rock and metal and punk and most hip hop and rap, it might sound different, but it all comes from the same place. I mean, it's fundamentally, it's youth music. And when you're a teenager, you want to listen to something that sounds like a fuck you, right? It doesn't matter what the actual genre is. So I don't know if it's genre versus genre these days. I think it's more like what feels real and what feels very commercial and throwaway, because you look at what the charts are doing in the UK, and it's just basically people aren't releasing albums, they're just releasing one track, and it gets big on TikTok, and then it shoots to the top of Spotify streaming listens or whatever else. But it's pure pop, it's pure big music industry kind of stuff, and a lot of it doesn't really last. I mean, when you're saying you're a Motorhead fan or something like that, it means you probably own 17 records, but fans of a lot of this very temporary kind of pop music, they're not consuming it in the same way, and so it's a very pop orientated country, in many ways, even though ironically, it's the home of Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. But the success of many of those bands doesn't come from support in the UK. It comes from their international appeal and international touring. Black Sabbath broke America. That's where their success came from. Iron Maiden, their last record had a 28 countries. They had a number one, on their last record. That's an incredible statement for a band that's been around for 40 years, but again, it's about the international success of these bands, not about what they've done domestically, because here, it's also it's the home of a lot of pop music and a lot of other kind of stuff. So it's very competitive. So it's a tiny country, but very influential. So it's not really about one genre or the other. It's about pop versus everything else. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with that. And, to your point, I think that there are a lot of influential bands and artists and other territories of the world. But unless they come to America and break it here, then chances are, the rest of the world won't hear about them. And that's kind of like a weird thing the way it works, but it's always been that way. And I think one thing that we've become good at is to take influences from everywhere and bring it all together, you know, and that's why I love metal so much. It's really the form of music that will take literally every other genre of music and incorporate it into our own. You know, we have rap metal, jazz metal, hip hop metal, folk metal, you know, literally everything plus metal exists out there. I think our biggest, or I should say our newest export in the world of metal has been gent. You know, so gent's obviously become a thing that the rest of the world has noticed, that started here in America and really born out of, you know, fusing several different genres together into one thing.
I don't know. Maybe it was Meshuggah thing from Sweden.
Yeah, everyone is thinking that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't deny that. But you know what we know of the word of the term. So sorry. So what I mean by gent is like, you know, Animals Leaders and Born of Osiris and like what those bands took from Meshuggah to do with it.
Wasn't Fear Factor kind of one of the first band that like made the kick follow the guitar and kind of made this?
I love Fear Factory, but ultimately they were kind of lumped in as new metal at the time, you know.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Industrial new metal.
Yeah, I think that's Frank. I think you're totally right. I mean, when I try to describe what I think metal is like, it's to me, it's like in a science fiction movie. It's like one of those aliens where like their genetic code can fuse with any other genetic code. You know, literally, that's how metal works. You know, and it's unbelievably difficult sometimes to trace the origins of things, like who did it first, because it's just like because it's sort of always underground. You know, I think that metal, look at what we're doing now. Look how many different countries we're connecting through this thing. We're sharing ideas and information, and that's the power of the metal underground. You know, like the tape trading scene, you know, is unbelievably influential. You look at like how grindcore started in just like, you know, one or two little English cities, and then all of a sudden it just sort of infected all these other little countries. And that wasn't because it had massive promotion. It was just because, you know, kids loved it and they wanted to share it. And, you know, that to me that's an incredible success story for something that has basically existed for 50 years without major mainstream support, you know, and now it's infected the whole world, which is kind of sort of beautiful, really.
Yeah.
As for me, I always like, you know, the mixture of genres and mostly the ethnic influence, like Sepultura did, or like Norwegian bands. Even in Russia, there are many bands that, you know, like Arcona, for example, I guess you know them and see on many festivals. They use this, you know, ethnic stuff really a lot. Or Viking metal, it's totally different thing. And I was always wondering why Florida, for example, was such a, you know, such a sunny place, and the heaviest genres like, you know, Floridian death metal came from that place. So.
It's the meth. No, I mean, Florida's a weird. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a really strange state. You know, I mean, when I hear reports of like somebody on bath salts eating somebody else's face, I'm like, yep, that sounds like Florida. So
Florida, man.
It's the swamps, you know. I mean, it is a sunny, like anywhere else. Like, there's no state that has just one. You know, even like my home city of New York City, a lot of people attribute it to being, you know, skyscrapers and concrete and everything like that. But you know, you leave 20 minutes out of the city and you're in nature. You know, so like, there's not one place or one state that has just one thing. You know. Florida has a lot of swamps, a lot of alligators, a lot of, you know, slums. And then it also has, you know, beaches and sunny spots and, you know, the Great Barrier, reefs and stuff like that. So
maybe a contrast, that it created a contrast almost like in Norway, where it was kind of, well, nice. And then you have a lot of kids getting bored and started, I guess, worshipping Satan and burning churches to create some action, I guess.
You know, the first time I ever went to Oslo, I swore that it was going to be nothing but woods. You know, I just thought, like, in my head, it was just like, oh, it's just woods and you know, half burnt down churches. And then I get there and it's just like this incredible city that's so clean, you know?
Yeah, and I guess Norway is maybe the only country in the world that supports metal on the government level.
That is partially true. Well, I guess we were very early with this kind of subsidiaries and stuff like this. But I know there is several countries in Europe now that has a lot of government support. In Colombia, they have two huge festivals with the biggest one is 110,000 people, and it's completely government funded and free. And they have a
metal festival.
Yeah, it's one whole day with extreme metal bands. But that was an example on government funding. It exists, but it's very difficult to get to, I think, in other countries than Norway, because in Norway we have a very good how do you call it, application platforms readily for almost everyone that's serious about what they're doing.
I see that people from Russia, young people mostly, they play in Europe bands, in US bands, and we start touring sometimes. And this is the good way. I believe it can proceed to some bigger and bigger things.
It's really hard. I think it's to have an export like that is a really big push, but you know, just because you have a tour here doesn't mean that you've made it, you know, and in the end, it's because it is such a big country and we see everything, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's overexposed, you know, like in New York City, I'm currently here in Los Angeles right now, but probably the same thing. But New York City really has at any given night 3 to 4 metal shows going on, and it's hard to navigate which one you're going to go to, and we're just exposed to everything. New York's a little different than most other places in America. I think people hearing a band is coming from Russia, they are going to like go and see that because it's different. You know, it's not the same show over and over and over again. And there happens to be a lot of Russians in New York, you know, so I think that alone will, get the Russians out there. But at the end of the day, to have a tour here, it's rough. It's going to be rough, and I mean, I can only wish them well. To have more. I would love to see more bands from other weird places of the world come here and tour. But I know that it's going to be rough.
Oh, it's probably a money question. Money question at the end of the day, I guess. To break like this, you need the exposure, and usually it's not cheap to reach the masses at the level needed.
I mean, that's all bands, really. I mean, you have to work your support before you could actually do a headlining tour. And, I don't want to generalize either. Like, it really depends on the level of the band, because you might be talking a small band, a big band, like, of course, if you're going to support a really big band, people are going to show up regardless, and it's going to be incredible exposure, So at the end of the day, that is going to be a great tour for more than one reason,
Or like, you mentioned the band from Mongolia today, The Who, for example, is, unique example. So everybody wants to see this.
I got one more question, guys, about the label role in modern heavy metal scene. It expands, it's become bigger or lower. How do you feel it?
I've worked with some labels during the years, and I think the question you're asking here from my point of view is that it depends how much the label is involved in planning your releases and guiding you, especially if it's newer bands. The label usually has to be very hands-on in communicating with the bands, if that's what they're doing. Of course, you have the modern label is more distribution than the label that used to be, I guess. I think if you have a basic knowledge of how to proceed in marketing and stuff, you can go pretty far without a label. But of course, when it gets to a certain point, you need to have like the knowledge of how to get in contact with booking agents. You need a good management, I guess, at certain points.
I mean, I would completely agree with that. You can go far on your own, but it is a lot of work, a lot of legwork by the band themselves. And at the end of the day, I've been in bands that were independent, and I've been in bands that were signed. But at the end of the day, like, it's amazing to have a team, you know, because it really takes a team to make it, you know, and it's an awesome experience to just have to worry about writing music and playing it, which
being the artist.
Right. Ideally, that's what you want from an artist, to worry about that, you know.
When I was a kid and I heard a band had been signed, I was like, well, they must be rich, you know? I mean, because it was just like, literally, you had no idea. It was like, wow, they're signed to so-and-so records or whatever else. And I think now we all know that the reality isn't like that. But yeah, I think that behind every successful band these days is a vision for it, you know? I mean, we talked about The Who as a good example. That is a band, you know, they were producing amazing media about themselves, amazing visual, like all of these sorts of things. It's obvious to me that there has been a plan with that band for a long time, you know, and all that. And every successful band, if it's from 40 years ago or now, has a vision. I mean, we talked about like touring as a way of, you know, breaking bands. And I think there's never going to be a substitute for that, is getting in front of people and playing music. But it does feel like the most successful bands that are really breaking through now are also maybe not personally themselves, but they have someone with them that's also a master of media as well and understands how different platforms work. Because I think that's such an important discovery tool, especially because a lot of traditional media, you know, is not the way that it was. You know, it isn't as powerful as it used to be. You know, a lot of people are discovering music for themselves, you know, and so I think that in order to work as a band, you have to have that. And the third one, I mean, this sounds like so mundane, and I'm not the expert in the room, certainly by any stretch of the imagination. But a lot of bands, they don't survive on touring and selling records. They survive on touring and having great merchandise deals, you know. And as a band that is starting out, I think it just seems to be such a fundamental aspect of how you get by, you know, at least until you get to that first rung of the ladder, when a label, management company, whatever else is going to be there to hopefully pull you up and take you a little further. Or at least that's been what I've understood from the people that I've spoken to. But there's also a bit of luck as well. But you need a lot of different things lined up. You know, there's no one single solution, it seems, for bands that are really just starting out.
I got a lot of questions, guys. We can do it all night.
Well, you know, may I add something? Because actually the most important thing that right now is we're developing this whole media space between our continents, you know. So that's the main reason we're here. And we can describe your scene, you can describe our scene always in our festivals. The main info source for us is things like, of course, Metal Hammer, you know, stuff like that, and, you know, Metal Sucks, different, you know, your platforms, of course, and all this, you know, World Metal Congress thing. We just, you know, see how it works.
Maybe a week or month later, if we gather one more time, I got even more questions for you guys, and maybe you got more questions.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the elephant in the room, that we're not in the same room because of COVID, you know, and what that's done to us.
Very true.
We can add more people from different places later.
Should get one from every 7 of the continents, you know.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem, actually. Well, there's 2 continents. That would be a little bit of issue.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a metalhead on Antarctica. You know, we
can get.
Yeah, isn't Guar from there?
Yeah, true.
I want to ask you about the studio recordings. Is it still necessary? Because I see a lot of bands buying equipment and making some home studios. It becomes more and more qualified.
I can answer from my point of view anyway. I think you can do a lot from home. There are, of course, people that has a genius vision of how they want their product in the end to come out, and it will have the sound, I guess, that maybe will stick out in the crowd and so on. But I don't, if there's any young bands listening or something like this, I don't think they should rule out the importance of working with a good producer and kind of let their music go a little bit and maybe work with someone that can guide their artistical vision or something like this. I don't know. Because you can see many bands that just went to a complete different level working with producers with a lot of experience. Like Kvelertak, they went from the Norwegian band. They went from being good until they went into the studio with, I think, the guitarist from Converge or something. And then they ended up with this sound that took them where they wanted.
If you can see behind me, I have like, music gear all like galore. I turned my living room into a home studio, and I've been, curating and producing an online, festival show called Slay at Home for really the whole pandemic at this point. And it's been an amazing adventure to get, some of my heroes involved and artists from all over who have a lot of home equipment, and we're trying to manage, put together these covers and stuff like that. And it's great for what it is, because we're all stuck at home. But at the end of the day, like, there's no substitution for being in the same room in a studio, a professional studio with a great producer, getting, keying in these amazing sounds and making every record a truly unique experience. And I think at the end of the day, that is what really separates home equipment from a studio setting, is that, you listen to, Slayer records and the progression that they've had, or Metallica records, the progression that they had, it all sounds different, with home equipment and the same plugins and the same stuff. It's just going to keep sounding the same no matter what you do,
Totally agree. I mean, I think every writer needs an editor, and I think, when you're making music, having a producer is so important, because the most valuable thing, I think, in any creative process is the word no, is somebody who's just going to say, no, you can't do that. You need that person. I think, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's ever going to be a full substitute for the experience of being in the room with somebody who can just sort of sit back and actually listen to what's going on and channel those things. I mean, I think producers especially are probably the unsung heroes of some of the greatest records of all time. I mean, just, geez, I mean, you mentioned Metallica, Frank. I mean, gosh, what would they be without Vladimir Rasmussen and without Bob Rock? I mean, just like how they changed. I mean, a record that's like literally turning 30 years old, the Black Album. I mean, it just, these are the invisible voices of like the iconic records of our age. And I don't think there's not an Apple plugin for that.
Completely agree, but I do think that at least producers nowadays are starting to get their attention that they deserve. Bob Rock I think he was always celebrated, but more and more producers, like Kurt Ballou of Converge, is a sought after name these days.
Totally. Andy Sneap. I mean, gosh, well, I mean, he plays in
that's a very good one.
Utterly prolific, but also plays in Priest. I mean, gosh, what a career.
Yeah, and this one is for Andy Sneap. If you hear this, Andy, you need to get on the panel at the Inferno Music Conference, because I've tried to get you on there many times now.
I heard Adam Dudkiewicz producing a lot of metalcore records too.
But that all said, you know what? You can make a great recording at home, especially if you don't have the money to spend on, studio time and stuff like that. I'm thinking about Cloud Kicker, for instance. It's a one-man group based out of, he was in Ohio for the longest time, and it was just like a bedroom project. That just blew up. He became like the biggest selling artist on Bandcamp many, many times over. And he's become like the poster boy of Bandcamp, and he did it all by himself in his room, using these plugins and stuff like that. And he did a terrific job.
I guess if you have the ear, or you have the vision, you can become the producer, I guess, at some point. I think Kurt Ballou, he didn't start as a producer. He ended up as that after doing the Converge and like doing that amazing sound.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he started out as just a guitar player and then worked his way into that after, learning the ropes. And now, yeah, he's, I mean, I've worked with him many times, he's produced a lot of my records and,
oh, cool.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I think of him as like a coach.
Was that for Meek is Murder or?
Yes.
Meek, yeah, it sounded like something for him.
And I think the thing is sometimes depends on the band and even genre. I can't imagine bands like Motorhead or Sodom, for example. Have you heard the last Sodom record? No, you can find even no plugins for this kind of style. It's just sometimes you need to hear that sound from the 80s. That's really cool. Rough mixes.
Absolutely. So Gojira, the two brothers, they moved to New York and built the studio. And that really, I think, transformed the sound of the band as well, that they had a space, that they built from the ground up to build the acoustics and really toy with. And then they would bring in producers, to their space. And so, yeah, I think it's, at the end of the day, it depends what level you're at and how much you could afford, but it's totally worth doing. And, just another name that pops in my head, of course, is Will Putney, has become like a really big sought after producer as well in the world of metal, so I think they're getting their attention. That's a great thing because they are important, hugely instrumental in what we hear.
What should we do? We can finish it for today.
I had to turn off the heating here because it's so loud.
What we can say is that no matter how far apart we are, no matter our differences in our scene, at the end of the day, we're all very much alike and brothers because of metal,
Amen. Very well said.
Yeah, thank you for coming, people, and let's continue and let's do playlist and the news and everything.
Would love to. That sounds fantastic. Please stay in touch.
Write your questions in the comments below.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on.
Very good, guys. It's very nice to connect with you. Please stay in touch and let's keep talking. Okay.
Cool.
Sure.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Great to meet you guys. See you later.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.